Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Keith, and today we are going to talk about voltmeters. Probably the most important piece of test equipment used to align tape decks, if not the most, certainly one of the most. And specifically, we're going to talk about how voltmeters present their readings to us, and what considerations we have to make, particularly when we use analog voltmeters. So let's get started. There are different types of voltmeter response modes. Voltmeters will measure voltages either by taking the average of the voltage, or taking the peak value of the voltage, or taking the RMS value of the voltage. RMS is short for root mean squared, and we'll talk more about that later on. So you can see, looking at this picture of a sine wave, the average value and the peak value are not the same. The RMS value is not the same as either of those two either. And that means that you need to know what you actually need. When the service manual tells you to measure a particular voltage, what are they talking about? They are talking about the RMS value, whether it's stated as a actual voltage or whether it's stated as a level in decibels. They are still talking about a voltage level that's measured and indicated in volts RMS. So why do the others even exist? And that's kind of a holdover from the past. Today, I don't want to say all digital voltmeters measure and display, indicate their readings and RMS values, but certainly the vast majority. However, if you use a digital meter when you are taking voltage readings or level readings while aligning a tape deck, you should probably check to make sure that your digital voltmeter is reading true RMS values. And we can, I'll give you an example real quick of the ones that I have. So what we're looking at here on top is the spec sheet for my bench meter. It's a Siglant 3055. And you see where it says AC voltage, true RMS, AC current, true RMS. That indicates that the voltage mechanism is responding to the RMS value of the signal coming in, and it is indicating the RMS value of the signal coming in. And this is the manual for my handheld. It's a Fluke 179. And it is a true RMS multimeter, handheld multimeter. Now, it is possible that today that you may get a handheld multimeter that is not a true RMS. And I guess even possible that your bench meter is not a true RMS. If either those are the situations with the digital meter, you should not use those to take measurements. So if it's a digital meter, make sure it's a true RMS meter. So that aside, what we're really going to focus on today is analog meters. So analog meters, in the past, they typically they were either a average responding and RMS indicating, or a peak responding and RMS indicating. Either way, no matter which voltage they were responding to, whether it be the average voltage or whether it be the peak voltage, the value that was displayed on the meter was on a scale that represented the RMS value. So if we look back at this picture of the sine wave, we'll see that the average value is less than the RMS value. In fact, the average value is about 11% lower than the RMS value. So for an average responding voltmeter to display the RMS value, it has to know that for a sine wave, the RMS value is about 11% higher than the average value that it reads. So it will make the indication on the meter face equal to about 11% higher than what it reads. The converse is true with the peak. A peak responding voltmeter knows that the RMS value is about 20 to 30% lower than the peak value. So it will make its RMS voltage reading indicate a value on the meter face of about 20 to 30% lower than what the peak value was that it measured. And that's just the way they worked. So the catch is the meter always assumes that it's a sine wave. And what you are seeing here, these differences between the average in the RMS and the peak in the RMS, is representative of what they are for a sine wave. If you had a wave like a square wave, a perfect square wave, in reality, the average, the RMS, and the peak are all the same value. But the meter doesn't know that. So if the meter is measuring a square wave, it will always assume it's a sine wave. So if it's an average responding meter and RMS indicating, it will take the average reading of the square wave and it will make the meter read about 11% higher than that for RMS, which is false. Because the square wave, the average and the RMS are the same, but the meter doesn't know it's a square wave. And that's why we care how the old analog meter works. Now there was most of the analog meters were either average responding or peak responding. There was, in fact, analog meters that were true RMS meters that responded based on the RMS voltage value and indicated the RMS voltage value. Those meters, though, were not as common, and they were more expensive to make and more complex to design. Unlike the digital meters today that take samples, and they'll do 100 samples a second or 1,000 samples a second, and they'll divide the sine wave up into like 1,000 little pieces. They'll take the measurement of each of those pieces. They'll square that measurement. They'll add all those squared measurements together, and they'll divide by the total number of measurements they took. And then they'll take the square root of that, and that's what they'll get the RMS value, because the RMS is the square root of the mean of the square of all the individual pieces. In the old analog days, they didn't have the ability to sample the way new digital meters do. So what they did was they had a device called a chopper, and they used a thermocouple to measure the total power capability in terms of heat. So they would use the thermocouple. This chopper would come on. The thermocouple would heat up. The chopper would go off. It would come on again. Thermocouple heat up again, and it would take all these heat measurements, tiny heat measurements, and it would basically go through the same process, although it wasn't actually a mathematical algorithm. It used capacitors and things like that to store the total capability, energy of the sine wave, and then it would present onto its meter that actual value. So they were true RMS responding meters. They responded true RMS and they indicated true RMS, just like most of the new digital meters do today. So again, why do we care? If you're a good technician, and I know you all are, one of the first things you'll do before you start an alignment is you will check the accuracy of your test equipment. If you use a device like this DMM Check Plus that I've talked about in previous videos, to check your digital meter, you won't have any problem, because the output of this device is a square wave, not a sine wave, but the digital meter doesn't care. But the old analog meter, like this, my HP 400D here on the left, it does care. It's always going to assume that what's coming in is a sine wave and not a square wave. So let me show you exactly what I mean. Hooked up right now, we have on my signal generator, we have a sine wave that's producing a 5 volt AC RMS signal. If we take this from this meter, we put it over here, we see that the old 400D is reading exactly 5 volts. I'm on the 10 volt scale, so right in the middle is 5 volts, and that's where the needle is. But if we change this from a sine wave to a square wave, and we adjust the output so that that meter reads 5 volts. That's okay, that's close enough, 5 volts. And now we put the signal into the old analog HP. You see that it's reading now above 5 volts. It's reading about almost 5.6 volts. So it's about 11% higher, which is what we would expect, because it knows that for sine wave, the RMS reading is about 11% higher than the average. And it doesn't know that it's looking at a square wave, so it's going to always indicate something that's about 11% higher than its average reading that it responded to. And that's why we care, because if you were to use the square wave source to adjust your old analog meters, you would be making those meters read incorrect. And that we don't want to do. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I hope this is information that is of value to you. If it is, then give me a thumbs up and a like. And if you have any questions at all about anything I've covered today, then just put it in the comments. And thank you for watching. And as always, the best way to keep your vintage audio equipment working is to use it regularly. Thank you, and bye for now.